Hey, it's Brian from Winter Garden Yoga, and today we're going to go over 2 stretches that will be very helpful for runners, walkers, pretty much anyone who sits a lot, walks a lot, or runs a lot. So they're going to emphasize loosening up the hamstrings and loosening up the hips, very beneficial ways. You may need a yoga block for this. You may need a chair for this one. Watch the video first. I'll show you the first stretch in a different progression and regression. That will show you when and where you may or may not need a yoga block and when and where you may or may not need a chair. The second stretch is pretty easy. I don't think we'll need anything for that. Just some solid ground and maybe a yoga mat. When you're ready, let's get started. Awesome. I'll demonstrate the first stretch in its entirety. We'll go over some steps and some tips and tricks, and then I'll show you how to break it down and make it a little bit easier by using a yoga block or a chair. Okay? So first, the full version. Let's lie down to the best of our ability. And the rules are kind of simple. Want to keep the legs completely straight, and you want to dorsiflex your ankle. That means pull your toes and the top of your foot towards your shins. This is going to be the barometer. If you can't keep your legs straight, if you can't keep your toes extended and your ankles dorsiflexed, that just means you're going too far too soon. It's not bad, it's not wrong, it doesn't mean you're an evil person, it just means you're going too far too soon, and you may need the yoga block or the chair to help. Let's assume we don't need a yoga block or a chair. So we lie back. I'm going to bring my left leg to about a 90-degree angle. The left leg is straight, ankle is dorsiflexed, toes are extended. Right leg is straight, ankles dorsiflexed, toes extended. And we just try to do a series of leg lift and leg lower. Breathe. The goal will be 10 to 15 repetitions per leg per side. This is what it's supposed to look like. Very, very close to this. Now here's what we got to watch out for. Here's how we know if we need to use a yoga block or a chair. Perhaps I go to start the leg lift. Legs are straight, everything looks good here until I start to lift my leg, my left leg. The first thing most people do is they point their toe. That's called plantar flexion. Don't do that. Most people plantar flex because it puts slack in the hamstrings. You're making the hamstrings shorter so it's easier to lift the leg. Don't do that. We want to have the dorsiflexion. We want to have as much length and good tension on the hamstrings as possible. So, if you go to lift your leg and you start to point your toes, do your best to keep pulling your toes towards your shin. That's the first thing. The second thing is the knee will bend. Maybe the leg is straight, and then as the leg comes up, it bends. Same thing. Most people are trying to make their hamstrings shorter, so it's easier to get more height out of the femur bone. Try not to let that happen. Keep your leg straight as you lift the leg up. Sometimes it's a combination of the two, plantar flexion and knee flexion. Try not to do that. Now, if it's impossible to keep your legs straight, dorsiflexion and toes extended, Here's where we bring in a yoga block or a chair to help. Awesome. Here's where the yoga block comes in. So, if I lie on my back, legs straight, if I can only get my leg so far off the ground before I start to point my toes or bend my knee, I want to put a yoga block under there to mark that height. Let's say here. That's as high as this leg can go before I start compensating. So the other leg will lift and lower to the height of this leg. (10 to 15 times. Let me do it on the other side. If this is as high as my leg can go before it starts pointing the toes and the knees bending, this is how high I'll do my leg lifts. This is how high you'll do your leg lifts. 10 to 15. And gradually over time, you will improve your range of motion. And that's where a chair can come in. You can rest your ankle on a chair and do your leg lift from there. Just remember, be patient with yourself. Don't rush this process. If your leg can only come this high off the ground, so be it. Keep your legs straight. Keep the ankle dorsiflexed, keep your toes extended. And then you would only do your leg lifts so high, not higher than this. And then gradually you'll get to this height, and gradually you'll get to be the height of a chair, etc., until you get the full 90-degree angle as demonstrated in the very beginning. Be patient. Awesome. The next stretch affects the outsides of the hips. A lot of runners complain about ITB syndrome, iliotibial band syndrome. That's just basically the muscles on the sides of the hips get really, really tight. So this stretch can help with that. 3 variations of this stretch. First is pretty easy. Just keep your legs straight. Do your best to keep your legs straight. Arms by your side. And it's your hips that are going to dictate the side bending. We're going to bend side to side. So in this case, I'm going to push my hips to my right. It's the hips that are going to the side. And hopefully you can see I'm getting a stretch from my outside ankle bone over my hip. And I might get it a little bit above my hip, maybe into my rib cage a tiny little bit. Back to center and go the other way. Just like the leg lift, this is dynamic in nature, in that we are moving. We're not going to hold these statically. Just move side to side. And go easy. And make sure you don't feel pain anywhere, particularly in the knees. Now the next variation is arms up overhead. It's called the sleeve puller. So this is my right hand. It's going to come up overhead. Left hand grabs onto my wrist. Same thing. I'm going to push my hip to my right, pull my arm overhead. So this way I'm getting a stretch pretty much from my outside ankle bone all the way up to my armpit. Tone your muscles, come up, sideways, opposite. Tone your muscles, come up, switch, stretch. Tone your muscles, come up, switch, stretch. Tone your muscles, come up, arms down. Just like in the very, very first, the leg lift mobility, about 10 to 15 repetitions each side. Now the third and final variation, we try to cross the knees this way. Mind your balance. Again, legs straight, use your hips, arms up overhead, going this way. And it's the hips, my hips are what's driving this mobility. Toned legs come up, go the other way. Stretch, toned legs come up. Switch, stretch, tone your legs, come up, gently release. Awesome. And there you have it. 2 stretches every runner should be doing if they want to have loose hamstrings and loose hips. Depending on what your coach will tell you, depending on what your training program suggests, will depend on where you put these stretches. Back in the day, when I ran my very first and only 10K, I did these stretches as needed. If I felt tight in my hamstrings and my hips, I would do these stretches. There wasn't a specific routine or outline, just as needed. So let your intuition guide you. If you're feeling kind of tight in your hips and hamstrings, give these stretches a try. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know if you'd like to see a specific topic covered. I'd be happy to do my best to answer your questions and to show you some yoga that can help you with your sports, with your yoga, with whatever you're doing in life. Thanks again. Go forth and be awesome.